There have been so many different things going on in the creator economy as of recently that I've been hearing about. And as usual on Soulcial Scoop, we don't always get to talk about the kind of news and what's happening. We talk about the news, but not always these like strategic things that we see playing out in our industry. So today I'm actually really, really excited to be able to talk with someone who gets it and about all of these topics that we don't usually get to talk about. So today we're here with Leah Haberman. Leah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to get into all this.
Yeah, this is like some juicy stuff that we're talking about today. So this is very exciting. For anyone who doesn't know you yet, can you kind of give us just the rundown on who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say it's juicy, but also with a side of business.
Yes.
I am previously was a marketer. I started early days of influencer marketing, and then I actually got hired by UCLA to teach a class at UCLA Extension on personal branding and influencer marketing. So I've been doing that for about 5 years. Both teaching and kind of mentoring and inspiring influencers, but then at the same time also working for brands and hiring influencers for campaigns. And then 2 years ago, I started working for an influencer as her chief marketing officer, running her fitness business for an app and a supplement product. And then I also, about 2 years ago, started writing a newsletter called In Case You Missed It. And it goes over kind of, business news, cultural trends, platform updates for specifically curated for creators. And I did a survey in January about like what people wanted more of. And they wanted more case studies or why things worked. And so, as the things we're going to be talking about today, I decided to start digging in a little bit. I think before it was kind of more of an overview of like, hey, here's 7 really important things that you should know about if you're a creator that happened this week in the news. And then this year, I just kind of pivoted a little bit to dig in a little bit deeper. So the tart trib, the de-influencing, things like that, looking at whether it's campaigns or things that influencers are doing or creators are doing, and digging a little bit into why is this working or why is it not working and what people should be thinking about for the future.
I
So
love
that's
that. I
me.
think I think first of all, it is so crazy to me that maybe I am aging myself a little bit here. When I went to college for advertising and marketing, the influencer world did not even exist. Like, we didn't speak a word of influencers. And now there is a literal college course on influencer marketing. I think that is the craziest thing ever, the coolest thing. Also, I wish that I could teach about influencing. I think that is so cool that you get to do that.
I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've been doing it 5 years, and like hopefully I'll do it 5, 10, 15 more,
Yeah.
whatever direction influencing goes or creatorship goes. Obviously it's going to evolve, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Definitely really cool. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is de-influencing. And this one I feel like was not as widely talked about, maybe. So, for people who are listening and have never heard this term before, can you kind of give us the rundown of what this even means?
I think at its most basic level, de-influencing is pretty much what you think it is. It's influencers telling you what not to buy. So typically they're influencing you to like consume something,
Yeah.
think of something, have an idea, kind of change your behavior. And this time they're literally telling you what not to do or what not to buy. So that's kind of like at the basic level. Uh, Jump ahead and kind of give you my take on
Yeah.
what I think de-influencing has morphed into. It's possible that when the first person created a de-influencing video, there really was this kind of idea that influencers are always encouraging us to buy this, do this, watch this. And it could have been kind of a rejection of consumerism or consumption.
Right.
That's what a lot of kind of traditional news outlets came out and they were like, oh, this is great. Like influencers are de-influencing. They want us to buy less, spend less money, shop more sustainably. Okay, I actually think that might be kind of like overcomplicating what we're seeing. I think what's
Yeah.
happened is influencers are looking at it. It's more of a curation strategy. So it's not don't buy this, but it's don't buy this and buy this instead. It's really just a way of kind of pointing you in the direction that they were going to wind up in anyways. Um, but they'll offer something up at the outset and say like, don't buy
Yeah.
this product, But then by the end of this video, they're going to, tell you to buy this mascara instead, or this meal plan, or, whatever it is that they're promoting. So I think it's really developed into more of like a curation content strategy, versus some sort of like larger anti-consumption movement,
Yeah.
um, that influencers are pushing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't think that that's an inherently bad thing. I think it's just like, let's not ascribe motives to it that
Yeah.
aren't actually there. And I think that just kind of shows the bias of like whoever's writing those articles is like, that's their assumption or their bias. But if you
Definitely.
actually watch the de-influencing videos, they're doing get ready with me's with all kinds of products. And then they're like, but don't buy this one product that doesn't actually work.
Right, when
So
they're talking about the products, they're not like, "Don't use this, you don't need it." They're like, "You need this instead." So, I agree. When I
yeah,
first heard this term, my first thought was, "Oh, wow, like, maybe it is about consumption and overconsumption, really," because I think
yeah,
that's something that a lot of creators maybe didn't necessarily struggle with previously, but are starting to be a little bit more conscious of, which I think is actually really great.
yeah.
I actually wonder what that will look like in the next couple of years. There's I don't know any sort of real name for it at this point, but the idea of creators actually just recommending things that you really, really need, not just like all of these things so they can get people into their Amazon storefronts or, onto their affiliate links, which I think is something that starts to give influencers a bad rep kind of. And those are where a lot of those assumptions come from, from people that are on the outside, like, oh, all you do is sit around and recommend makeup products all day.
Ultimately it's a struggle, right? Because if they really de-influenced you and told you you don't need any new products, just go into your closet, go into your makeup drawer and use what you have, and here's how you can do it. And there are creators that do that. There are
Yeah,
influencers that are like, create like, shop your own wardrobe and stuff like that.
right.
Ultimately they don't make money. And if they don't make
Exactly.
money, it's kind of like this constant battle we have between art and commerce. And like, we want our influencers to be authentic. We don't want them to encourage people to overconsume. But at the same point, we want their free
Right.
content. Like, you want to tune in every day. You want to watch the Get Ready with Me. You want to watch these things. Like, it costs money to have the products to do the Get Ready with Me or whatever
Yeah,
it is that you're watching. And they need to be paid. So I think it is,
right.
we do have this struggle right now. And like you said, I'm not sure what the ultimate is or like how we solve for this. But if there, if your income is tied to recommending products, then you're going to have to continue recommending products in
Right.
whatever way that you can. So it is, we have these, I think, unrealistic, I think like society has these unrealistic expectations of influencers or creators, and that like they should just create content for us for free, stop pushing products. And it's like, it doesn't work that
Right.
way. That's all part of the exchange. So I feel
Exactly.
for influencers.
Yeah, I mean it's not an easy position to be in. I feel like you really have to pick and choose and decide like what you are going to be recommending, and maybe that's something that is through a paid partnership or is not. But again, like there has to be some way that you're sustaining creating all of this free content. Now thinking about the like traditional de-influencing term as we were originally talking about it, is this something that you think creators should be steering clear of or not? I think about this in the way of working with brands. For example, I mean, we're going to talk about Tarte after, so we'll use Tarte as an example. If I love Tarte, but like there's products that I don't like from them, is it going to steer Tarte in the opposite direction if I were to post something that says, like, oh, my de-influencing post, do this, but don't use this Tarte product.
I think it depends on why you're de-influencing a product. And so I think if you're saying, listen, I love Tarte for X, Y, and Z, but I don't use this because I found a better alternative, I think that's okay. If you come out and you're an
Yeah.
influencer or creator and you're hoping to work with Tarte and you say, don't use their mascara because it's a shitty product and it clumps and just makes me look awful, then I think, yeah, you're pretty much like ruling out future
Right.
opportunities with that brand. So I think it's being in it's in everything in influencer or kind of a creatorship is like being intentional. So being super intentional about the products that you use, about the products that you recommend, about the products that you de-influence. And I don't think that rules out future partnerships, but again, it's like being
Yeah.
very specific, very intentional. If you do rule something out, you do it in a way that doesn't close future doors. If you don't care and you're like, I'm never going to work with this brand, they're just not part of me, they're not part of like my overall brand, and they don't align with my values, then I think it's okay. And
Yeah.
you can be like, yeah, never use this product. And I'm sure that we'll see that. But I think creators that are doing that have thought very intentionally and strategically about, okay, it is unlikely I'm ever going to work with this company. And I'm okay with that because I
Yeah.
much prefer, these other XYZ brands. And these are the brands that I want to work with. So I'm going to align myself with those.
Yeah, I actually think that if I were on the brand side, again from the perspective of Tarte, and someone talked all the time about my products that they love, but maybe there's a few that they don't like, I think that's very realistic. Not every product, especially with a brand like that from Tarte, for example, or Benefit, these brands that have literally every possible makeup and skincare product, like there's no way that everyone is going to love every single one. So I feel like it almost comes off more authentic if you are saying like, well, this wasn't my favorite, I do have something else I like instead of this. But like I do love everything else that I've used from Tarte. Like that feels very authentic to me versus, oh my gosh, I love Tarte, everything that they do is perfect, like they do no wrong, because
Yeah.
obviously again I don't think that's a very realistic
I think
perspective.
it comes across in like two opportunities from the brand side. One is like you said, it's much more authentic, and really kind
Yeah.
of gives like a validity to like they genuinely like your products because they're not just recommending
Yes.
everything, but specifically those things. Also, and this is something I'm always recommending to brands that I consult with, or people that I'm talking like marketers I'm talking to, is like bring in influencers beyond just like an endorsement post. You should be looking at influencers as essentially like focus groups and consultants for you, bringing them in for
Yeah.
R&D, bring them in for focus groups. Like if somebody is recommending your products and but they de-influence or don't recommend like a certain product, like I think that's an area of opportunity for growth and discussion, and be like, reach out to that influencer. Any brands listening, reach out and be like, hey,
Yeah.
we're just curious. Like, why don't you like it? We're not going to take it personally. We just want to know. Like, influencers are one of your best sources of information, of understanding your customer, because they
Yeah.
understand your customer better than you do. So it's like, reach out to that influencer and ask them, what is it that you don't like about this? How could we make it better? Like, I think it's actually tremendously valuable for brands. You have to be very confident about your product and not get
Yeah.
offended, not take it, this isn't personal, it's business, and just use it as an opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think overall the message is just like being honest about what you're sharing, but strategic about it as well. If you are going to be kind of like protecting your future as a creator, if it is a brand that you want to work with one day. So I also wanted to talk today. This was kind of like my favorite thing to talk about. These massive brand trips that influencers are going on. Tarte was the one that I think really this year started to like ruffle some feathers. Glow Recipe, I think they maybe have just gotten back. At least when we're recording this, just a couple days ago. But that trip is like pretty active. So there's these
Yeah.
two big brand trips. Obviously, the idea of brand trips is not new by any means. Brands have been taking creators on these trips for years. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts as to why you think this Tarte trip just like blew up the internet and everyone just kind of like realized that these are happening.
It's a different type of trip. So first of all, I think it's the first time that like it's a major TikTok creator trip, as opposed
Very
to
true.
previously we've seen like Instagram or YouTube. And I think we were used to it with Revolve. It's something that they've done for a really long time. Revolve also, I feel like a lot of trips, not all of them, but like some of the trips kind of aligned with things like Coachella, or were like
Yes.
incorporated into other festivals. For example, I think the Tarte trip was, okay, we're not going to Dubai for like some other kind of, we're not glomming onto another festival. We're not just like a
Yeah.
house, like a retreat house at another festival. This is like, it's all about Tarte. It's all about TikTok creators. I think one of the reasons that it ruffled feathers, and it's not necessarily accurate, but because of the economy, and everybody was like,
Yeah.
it's $10 for a carton of eggs, and you're flying these people to Dubai. I think the eggs thing
Yeah.
was like a big comparison point for a lot of people for a lot of different things, not just the Tarte trip, but like everybody was saying, like, okay, the cost of eggs, and they're going to Dubai first class and staying at the Ritz and doing all of these luxury things. So I think like
Yeah.
against that backdrop, a lot of people kind of took it in the wrong way. And again, I think it's almost like the de-influencing where you have the people that are writing the articles at media outlets or, examining this or analyzing this, are not necessarily TikTok. They're not necessarily on TikTok. They're not necessarily into TikTok creators. They're not necessarily part of Gen Z. I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of the articles were written by Gen Z. And really, this Tarte trip, I think, was specifically aimed towards a Gen Z customer. And so I think a lot of it was like bringing biases on of, this is what we think influencing should be. This is what it shouldn't be. And just kind of being very, I would say, judgmental about Tarte's efforts.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was like a perfect storm of all of these elements that went into it. And I almost feel bad for the glow recipe trip because clearly, like, when you plan a trip of this magnitude with these influencers, you have to make sure they're free. You have to, book their schedules,
Right.
work with like managers, agents, whatever. Clearly the glow recipe trip, like, that wasn't thrown together at the last minute. Like, that was in the works, planned. But
Right.
yeah, they must have been, I feel like that must have been frustrating for the people that planned the glow recipe
Yeah.
trip to have Tarte happen like just weeks before when they knew they had this big trip
So close
coming
together.
with a lot of the same creators, and just thinking like,
Yes.
oh, if we could just get a fraction of the headlines that Tarte is getting from this trip. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was very interesting to watch from the outside. And I think one thing that I saw in a lot of videos, or I saw a lot of people explaining, was why brands even do these like massive trips. For the amount of money that they probably spent on that trip, they could have, talked to a ton of other influencers and, done sponsored posts they could have basically spent that budget in a very different way with more influencers. Why do you think that they did this? Like, why do you think that they dedicated so much of their budget to this specific trip with only what? I think there was 5 or 6 influencers that went on the trip?
No, it was closer to 20 or 25, I think, and they
Oh,
all
wow,
brought their
really? Okay.
plus ones. Yeah.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
okay. Well, I mean, there's like a couple of different ways to look at it. I think, people saying, oh, they could have spent their budget in different ways. If you look at like Tarte's financials, they're doing pretty well. They were, I think, Like to Know It came out with a survey or statistics around last year of like the best selling influencer products on Like to Know It for 2022, and Tarte was number two. So like they're
Wow.
doing well, they're doing really
Yeah.
well with influencers. So these are people that kind of have a big budget. And I think a lot of, maybe influencer campaigns or influencer programs or trips tend to be kind of like on the smaller side. But you look at like something that I was discussing is you look at like the Super Bowl, companies are paying $6 million to have one Super Bowl spot. So like if a
Yeah.
company like Budweiser or Doritos or whatever it is can do one Super Bowl spot for $6 million, like to me, what is the problem with Tarte doing $6 million
Yeah.
for a big influencer trip? And like, honestly, with the amount of articles, like, I don't think it reflected that badly. There were a lot of people who criticized and jumped on the criticism again because it was trending and it was like a content strategy to like
Right.
come on and criticize Tarte. But like the amount of articles that got written, the fact that we're talking about on this podcast right now, like whatever they spent, and I don't think it was up to $6 million. I think it was probably like it could have been a million or 1 to 2 million,
Yeah.
but I don't think it was 6 million. But even if they did, if you look at the earned media, which is like all the press that they got for it, plus the whatever sales, plus the fact that like they
Right.
really made a huge impact on TikTok. Again, like I think Tarte had been, it's
Yes.
been around for a while. I think like YouTubers knew about it, Instagrammers knew about it, but I think like it hadn't made a huge impact yet on TikTok, and this made a massive impact on TikTok. It kind of put them on the map. Um, I
Yeah.
think it's money well spent, and if they don't spend anything else for the rest of the year, they still got more mileage out of this trip than I think a lot of like smaller influencer marketing campaigns. I think I think it's really smart as a strategy as a marketer. I think you either do a lot of kind of tiny campaigns or you go really big and you do
Yeah.
one massive thing. You're trying to move the needle. And so I think like landing somewhere in between, it's just kind of like a lot of white noise. And so I think they just decided like we have the budget, and instead of spending like all of these kind of like doing these small things, $5,000, $10,000 throughout the year, we're just going to go really big. And I think it worked out for them. I think we're going to see a
Yeah,
lot of
I would
companies try and recreate. Like, I don't think other companies are going to be as
yeah,
successful, but I think that
right.
like a lot of companies are going to look at this and be like, "Oh, this is interesting."
Yeah, I mean, I think it really put even the brand trips on the map. Like again, these have been going on for so many years now, and a lot of people
Yeah,
didn't even know that they existed. But after hearing about everything that we heard about with this trip, like it's impossible not to know what happened. So all of that being related to Tarte, like all press is good press at the end of the day. Like people were talking about them, we're talking about their brand. They wanted to go watch those videos because they wanted to see, oh my God, wait, I have to see this Dubai trip for myself. And
yeah,
everyone saw their products in all of that content. So I actually think it worked out really well too.
yes.
And how about the glow recipe trip? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add, both for Glow Recipe and for
Hmm.
Tarte, the thing that if you look at like kind of like spending trends, Gen Z is on trend to be by 2030, they're going to be the largest consumers of luxury products. So when I was saying like, oh,
Wow.
we're going to talk gossip, but business as well, I think like you have to have an awareness of like
Yeah.
economic trends and understand like where things are going. So that's one of the reasons that I'm like, okay, everybody that might look at this and be like, oh, this is terrible because the economy sucks and like people are suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Gen Z doesn't necessarily feel the same, so I think it's really important to be tapped into like how does Gen Z feel about luxury trips and luxury products. Well, turns out they're pretty
Right.
okay with it because they're kind of headed in the direction of like they're living at home, they have more disposable income. Like you have to have an understanding of all of these factors. Okay, so the glow recipe trip, like
Great
as we
point.
said, I think I feel for them in that theirs happened to be right after the Tarte trip. I think they might have gotten more mileage out of it if the Tarte trip hadn't happened first. I feel like
Yeah.
I've heard people talking about the Glow recipe trip, but it's been much more insiders, like other people in influencer marketing and other creators
Right.
versus kind of like mainstream media. Um, I mean, it looks like a gorgeous trip. I think it's interesting. So, especially for your audience, the people that are creators or influencers, and we were talking about being strategic and being intentional. From a brand side, I think the Glow Recipe trip looks gorgeous. I think it looks very luxurious. I think they took a really good mix. They have much more diversity on their trip. So I think like as
Yeah.
opposed to Tarte, I actually think the Glow Recipe trip was like from a brand side, they were much smarter, more intentional, kind of put more thought
Mhm.
into like the people that they curated to have on this trip. From an influencer or creator perspective, the videos that I've been watching, like it seems like a much more wild, reckless party. There's been a lot of like
I noticed the same thing.
drunkenness, hangovers, and I'm not sure if Tarte asked people not to talk about that, but I feel like the perception is the Tarte trip was a little bit more like high end and luxurious. The
Yeah.
Glow trip felt a little bit more, and this is not Glow's fault, but I think from an influencer perspective, it felt a little messier, a little more chaotic. From strictly speaking, like as a somebody who works with creators, influencers, hires them, advises them, I think you
Yeah.
just have to be really intentional and strategic about what you're doing. And it's the same thing about de-influencing a product. You want to be thinking 5, 10 years down the road. I think everything that you do, you should show up with like intention and strategy. Yes, you want to be authentic, and there's nothing wrong with having fun, but I think you also want to think about like, okay, if I want to launch a company in the next year or two, like how do investors feel about my behavior right now? And so,
Yes.
you should be constantly thinking about it's the creator market fit. Like you think about how do I show up and be authentic? How do I show up in a way that my audience appreciates and enjoys and I can, influence them? But also, how do I show up in a way that like current and future and potential sponsors, investors, business partners are going to think
Yeah.
about me? And those three things need to always be kind of in, there needs to be a balance of those three. And so I don't know, the glow trip, I just felt like, um, especially as influencers and creators become entrepreneurs, become business owners, you look at like Mr. Beast, Emma Chamberlain, the trend really is
Yeah.
the D'Amelio sisters. You're looking at all of these people who are like going into traditional industries, launching, more traditional companies where they're selling things, whether it's a service, a subscription, like apps,
Right.
products. Um, you just want to be thinking as like a smart strategic business person, and like showing up sloppy drunk is like, it's fun, and I'm sure it's authentic to what they were doing, and like their audience might like it. But I just think
Yeah.
in terms of like longevity as a creator entrepreneur, um, that could cause problems for you down the road. And so,
Right.
would I do it in such an open way? Like, no, I'd kind of like have fun, but I think just like I would rein it in
Reel
a
it in a
little
little.
bit just
Yeah.
to think about like the future of my career. And again, it depends what your plans are. Like if you're just a creator and you're like, it's a side hustle, it's a hobby, it's fun, I just want free stuff and I want to get like a
Right.
few things, but like this isn't my main gig. This is not my plan in life. I'm not entrepreneurial. I basically want to get a job. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever. There's I think there's probably less impact or less consequence there. But if you are that person that's like entrepreneurial and you want to bring out your own, develop your brand, bring out your own products, I think it's worth thinking about.
That's a really great point. I mean, from Glow Recipes perspective, but also from the creator's perspective as well, it's like paying attention to what you want people to see when they Google your name. That's got to always be in the back of your mind. With the way I was kind of like looking at this trip at first was I know they were launching like some hydrating product, I believe. I mean, a lot of what Glow Recipe does is all hydration based. But they went to Wyoming, a very, very cold place where they could really show where all or how all of their hydration products really worked. And then as soon as I saw all of the videos with them going out, and I was like, maybe they picked those party people like on purpose so that they could have really dehydrated, like hungover skin, and they could show how good their skin looks after using Glow Recipe products. So I wonder like if that played a part into who they chose to come on this trip, because I know there were a couple girls on that trip that are very much known for, like the Alex Earl. She's always out there partying in a bikini somewhere. So that kind of like made sense for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, companies never do anything or rarely do things by accident. So it is true that like
Right.
anytime you see something, it's probably intentional. Um, yeah, absolutely. I think they may have picked people who are going to need that like that skin recuperation, glowiness, whatever. Um, it felt like from like an objective kind of outsider perspective, it just felt like it went a little bit
Yeah.
over the top. And I don't necessarily think that that's on Glow. I think it's more when I watch it and I think about creators and their careers and their career longevity,
Right.
I'm just like, wait, like what's your plan next
Uh-oh.
year? Because like you don't want
Right.
this video, like this video on the internet, like you want this to disappear because this is not going to look good in like a
Yeah,
board meeting or like when you're going out and asking for like a $10 million investment. Like this is not what you want people looking at on their phones
exactly.
during that in that conference room.
Right. And when it's on the internet, it never goes away. And actually, one person who has, I think, learned that very much so in the last year is Michaela Nagara. She is kind of the next topic that I wanted to talk about here. Another thing that I think, unless you're living under a rock in the last few weeks, you've probably heard about this. Michaela Nagara and the L'Oreal telescopic mascara situation. For anyone listening who hasn't heard about this somehow, basically, Michaela Nagara, beauty influencer, she was doing a paid partnership with L'Oreal for one of their mascaras and showing how good the mascara worked. She was quote unquote wearing false lashes, or she was accused of also wearing false lashes. So, um, this was I mean, this like blew up the internet. I felt like everyone was talking about this, and so many people went to buy that mascara to show, like, no, like it really works, or like, no, she was lying, it doesn't really work. So, what did you think about this whole debacle?
I think there must have been some really interesting meetings after the video between L'Oreal and Michaela.
Yeah.
And a little bit to your point, or how we talked about like nobody does anything by accident. Um, First of all, we don't know that Michaela put false lashes on, and that's why I've
Right.
been hesitant to like weigh in on either side, because she still has
Right.
not acknowledged whether or not after she applied the mascara she put false lashes on, which is kind of the accusation that everybody's saying. It's not an authentic video. It wasn't the mascara. It was actually the false lashes. And
Yeah.
she's never confirmed that. Like that's literally based on speculation. Um, what I think was interesting is that after that happened, I feel like it's like acceptable risk. Like I assume L'Oreal and Michaela talked. There's always a clause in the
Yeah.
contract. Like if a brand is unhappy or feel like somebody did something inauthentic or like somehow damaged, if there's going to be any material damage to the brand, they're going to take that campaign, like cut that campaign and ask the influencer to take it down.
Right.
And typically it's in the contract, like you need to take that down if the brand asks you to take it down. The fact that um, it's gone on and nobody, I think they did she took the video down, didn't she? Or is
I
it
don't think so.
still
Or
up?
at
She,
least yesterday when I was
it
researching, it
was
was
still
still
there.
there.
The fact though that they haven't come out with a statement, like she went on the glow trip, so
Right.
she's out there doing stuff. L'Oreal
Right.
hasn't come out with a statement. She hasn't come out with a statement. I assume that like they reviewed the video, they weighed the risks, and they decided
Right.
that, you know what, this is really good. All press is good press. We're getting really good mileage or traction out of it. The fact that she hasn't cut that L'Oreal didn't ask her to release a statement, I'm assuming, again, this is speculation and I don't know, but I'm assuming that maybe they weren't false lashes, but L'Oreal is just
Yeah.
loving the fact that everybody assumes they're false lashes. They're going out to try it. They're using the product.
Right.
Because like I don't think like a brand won't leave that to chance. And so I think if there really was something there, um, I think that they would have made her not only take it down but also issue a statement and kind of
Right.
like distance themselves from her, and tell people, and have some sort of statement where she would have to apologize for it and they would
Yeah.
have to say, we don't condone this behavior. So I think the fact that that hasn't happened, I think they probably assessed the risk. They looked at what happened and they were like,
Yeah.
this is an acceptable level of criticism that we're willing to kind of endure, because people are going to try the mascara and they're going to realize that it's a pretty good mascara. I've never tried the mascara, so I don't know. But I have seen like all these
Not
other people,
sponsored.
right? Not sponsored, but I have seen other people. I think Remy Bader tried it like last night. She didn't happen to like it. But I thought it was interesting. If she did put false lashes on, obviously that is kind of like the worst. That always sets influencer marketing
Right.
back when somebody gets busted for something like that, and you're like, you're endorsing a product, and then you're kind
You
of like
ruin it for the rest
faking.
of us.
You're ruining it for the rest of us. It's like faking the product or faking the endorsement,
Right.
faking kind of the results, or that's what everybody's looking for, is a transformation. It's like you want to think that like your life's going to be better, happier, fitter, more wonderful. Your
Right.
house is going to look better. Whatever it is, it's like we believe in influencers because they're kind of like the guides leading us on a path to transformation. Like my life is going to be
Yeah.
better if I take this advice. And so if it is false, I mean, it's terrible, and it's kind of like the very worst example of what everybody accuses influencers of doing, which is like faking it and being inauthentic, and it's just about the brand
Yeah.
deals. Maybe I'm an optimist, but again, because she hasn't put out a statement, because L'Oreal hasn't distanced themselves from her or put out a
Right.
statement, I'm going to be optimistic and say maybe it wasn't false lashes. Maybe their mascara is just really that good. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we don't know.
We will never know, probably. Yeah, I had actually, I mean, like, there were so many videos about this all over TikTok of people talking about, what their thoughts were on this. And I found one person's video that I thought was so different than everyone else's. She had basically said that for someone who's been a makeup artist for so long, like, how did she basically like make it look like she had false lash, like how did she make so many people believe that there were false lashes on, uh make him look so obvious basically. And so she thought that the entire thing was something that like was strategically planned to basically market to influencers, so that influencers, because again, how many big influencers went and bought that mascara and showed it to their whole audience. And then now everyone's audience is talking about this mascara, and they only had to work with one person, pay one person to get it. And especially after like the lack of Michaela's response, it almost felt, and she had like the beginning of a video where she said like, all right guys, you know what we're going to talk about today. It was the first video right after the big video. And so you thought that she was going to come on and again like release some sort of statement, but the way she kind of like teased it, it was almost just like, did she do this on purpose and this was like a whole planned thing? And it was an interesting opinion. I don't know where I stand on the whole thing, but I saw that and I was like, wow, like I could see that. Like again, everything brands do is intentional, so that could totally
Super
have been the plan.
intentional and very rarely make a mistake. So I think it's like, whether it was, yeah, let me blatantly, overtly fake it with lashes and then see what the fallout is, which seems risky. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I think, or she did it. Again, people accused her of using false lashes and maybe they weren't. And it was that was just the mascara. And L'Oreal was like, let's run with it because honestly, like this is the best accusation we could get that our mascara creates the look of false lashes. So, let's just kind of let it go. That is interesting. And I think you touch on an interesting point though, is that like now the whole outrage strategy of like jumping on another creator's mistake is its own content strategy now of like finding other people to criticize, and just that like, I don't know, that to me is like too bad that that's just become like a thing. And I know it's not new. I think it's just newer to TikTok. I think like the whole YouTuber beauty drama was literally just reacting to each other and like, calling out each other's shit. And I feel like, okay, TikTok was like more original content, I think, for a while. And now I think we've kind of like come to like that saturation point where people are like, how can I stand out? And they're like borrowing the YouTube model. We've gotten to that stage.
Very interesting. Watching the whole thing play out was quite the scene. What do you feel like creators can kind of take away from this experience? What I made a video on related to this experience was FTC guidelines, because I felt like they were kind of thrown in there. Her disclosure was very quickly and not super visibly thrown in there. And so I think that also bothered a lot of people. So I had made a video talking about like, different things she could have done to disclose that it was an ad. Do you feel like aside from that, there's anything else that creators might be able to take away from this experience?
I think the FTC is a really good one. I think a little bit to your point, and I see this on Twitter a lot, where people will make an kind of slightly outrageous but harmless statement or make a mistake, a little bit like you said, like do something that's kind of like blatantly or overtly wrong, not necessarily like illegal or unethical. But I think in a way, I feel like that's a way to get people kind of like engagement baiting, essentially, is like, have like a typo in your caption. I mean, it drives people crazy, especially like when you have like the closed captioning and there's like a very obvious mistake and people won't delete that. I think it's like thinking about that of like, in a positive way. Again, you don't want to be like, do anything illegal or unethical, but like, are there things that you can do or like offer like a contrary opinion to something that's very popular, that, people can jump on and debate in the comments. It seems like that's become, and, the thing that I would love to see too is like, when everybody is saying they're false lashes, when everybody is criticizing the Tarte trip, like come out on the other side. I don't know. That's something I felt like we're not seeing enough of. It's like everybody's jumping on the like anger and outrage, but like, why not come out on the flip side? To me, that's kind of like a big, like a blue ocean strategy, like empty space where like that nobody's filling. It's like, come out on the other side, or also like do I don't know, just the whole outrage for outrage's sake. And talking about the economy and whatever, and not looking at like the details, like just think about like do like critical thinking, like who's in this story and is
Right.
this actually true? Like, does Gen Z hate luxury products? No, actually they don't. They're like the primary consumer for luxury products. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
I just feel like you could have spun out a lot more content around that. Not you, but like just kind of, creators in general could have
Yeah, yeah,
spun out
yeah.
like a lot more content around that, and like looking at like larger kind of like, macroeconomic or cultural trends.
Right.
Again, with the Michaela, it's like, I don't know, be the person that like takes a bird's eye view and looks at it and is like, uh, is a little bit more, I don't, just looks at it from the flip side. I think if everybody's going
Right.
to the right, go to the left. Like when everybody zigs, you zag. And just, I
Yes.
think that there's something to that in like not just being outraged, and producing like outrage content just for the sake of it.
Yeah, outrage content. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and I mean, I definitely think if you're in it looking for, to a lot of people like rode on this wave of the drama so they could get views when they were talking about
Yeah.
it. And I think if you're in it to get views like that, it's very true. Like if you are kind of talking about it from a different perspective, like when I heard the girl about the opinion about, oh, they're marketing to influencers, that was something I hadn't heard versus every other person had the exact same thing that they were
Right.
saying. So like how can you offer a different perspective or a different opinion on something if you are going to talk about it? I think that's actually a really great point. Something that I
Yeah.
could learn from as well.
It takes a little bit more research and a little bit more thought and planning to create that content, because like you
Yeah.
actually have to go look for the different perspective. But I think
Yeah.
there's a better payoff for you as a creator in the end than just
Yeah.
jumping on the bandwagon and doing the same video that we already watched like 100 times before.
Literally. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That was awesome. So I'm so glad we got to talk about these topics. I think there's a lot that creators can learn from them. Thank you so much for spewing your knowledge today. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And we will see you guys next week for another episode.